One of the most amazing truths in all of the Bible is that you and me, people like us, can know God, can know the one who created the beauty of the earth, one who can know Him who hung the stars in space, that we can really know Him. In fact, the Apostle Paul, one of the great Christians of all times, wrote this. He said, that I might know Him in the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His sufferings, being made conformable unto His death. And that was an interesting thing that Paul wrote, because when he wrote that, he already knew Him. In fact, on the road to Damascus, Jesus appeared to him. He met Jesus. His life was changed. He was turned from being a hater of Christianity and Christians to being a lover of God and a lover of Jesus, and one of the great proponents of the good news of Jesus Christ. But even though he knew Him, he wrote that I might know Him. Now, what did he mean by that? You see, I knew my wife when I met her. I mean, I got to know her and we were married, and I knew her and I loved her. But the longer we've been married, the better I've gotten to know her. I've gotten to know her weaknesses, I've gotten to know her strengths, and she's gotten to know me. And so it's in that kind of knowledge, that deep, intimate knowledge, that Paul is writing. He says, I want to know Him in the power of His resurrection. And I do. I want to know God in His power, in the power of His resurrection. I want to see God do great and mighty things, because He's a great and mighty God. But also, he said, that I might know Him in the fellowship of His sufferings. Not just know Him in the great things, but know Him in the tough things. Know Him in the hard things, because Jesus went through sufferings. Jesus went through some difficult times. And Paul said, I want to know Him, not just in the great times, but I want to know Him in the tough times. I want to know Him in the sorrows. And I can tell you this, that my wife and I, our love for each other has grown as we've gotten to know each other better, but not just in the good times and the happy times, but also in the hard times and the difficult times. And so we want to know Him in the fellowship of His sufferings. And then he concludes by saying, being made conformable unto His death. And you see, what happens is when we get to know Him in the power of His resurrection, the fellowship of His sufferings, we're made more like Jesus. We become like Him, especially in His death. And the epitome of the love of God for mankind is found when Jesus died on the cross. And something happens to us when we get to know God in the fellowship of His sufferings, in the power of His resurrection. We are made conformable into the death of Jesus, and we have a supernatural love. We're more like Jesus. We love people more like Jesus loved people. We become more like Him. So get to know God in the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His sufferings, being made conformable unto His death.